In the ancient city of Samaria, the air was thick with despair. The once bustling streets now lay eerily silent, broken only by the cries of hungry children of the desperate. The city was under siege. The mighty Aramean army had surrounded it for months, cutting off every source of food and supplies. Inside the walls, life had withered. Starvation had driven the people to the brink of madness, some to acts so unspeakable they could not be uttered aloud. And just outside these walls, there were four men, four outcasts marked by a cruel disease. Lepers, unwanted, unloved, forgotten. They sat in the dust, their bodies weak, their spirits weighed down by the sting of rejection. One of them, a man named Jaden, broke the silence. Why are we just sitting here? Do we think help is coming? Do we think our hunger will fade if we wait long enough? His voice cracked, not just from thirst, but from the raw frustration of their helplessness. Neriah, the youngest of the group, lifted his sunken eyes. If we go into the city, we'll starve with the rest of them. We're not even welcome there. And if we stay here? Asked Elon, the eldest. We'll die just the same. Jaden leaned forward, lowering his voice as though afraid the very wind might betray them. The Aramean camp is nearby. Their tents are filled with food, supplies, wealth. We go there. If they kill us, so be it. Death will come for us anyway. But maybe, just maybe, they'll let us live. The others exchanged glances. It was a mad plan, perhaps even suicidal. But in that moment, it was the only plan they had. Slowly they nodded, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, the four men rose to their feet and began their perilous journey. The night was quiet as they crept toward the enemy camp, their hearts pounding in unison. The flicker of torches lit their path, and the distant silhouettes of tents came into view. But something was strange. "Do you hear that?" whispered Shammah, the most cautious of the four. They paused, listening intently. There was nothing. No shouts of soldiers, no clang of weapons, no sounds of men preparing for war. The camp was silent. As they stepped into the first row of tents, their eyes widened. Food lay scattered on tables, untouched. Bowls of stew, freshly baked bread, wineskins still full. Piles of gold and silver glimmered in the torchlight, abandoned. "Where is everyone?" Neriah asked, his voice trembling. It was Jaden who spoke first, the shock slowly giving way to realization. "They're gone. They've fled." The four men stared at each other, hardly daring to believe it. The mighty Aramean army, gone without a trace? It seemed impossible, but as they moved deeper into the camp, their discovery only became clearer. The Arameans had vanished, leaving behind their wealth, their supplies, their victory. It was as if God himself had emptied the camp. At first, the lepers were consumed by their hunger. They fell upon the food, eating ravenously, drinking deeply, their gaunt faces filling with life. They laughed as they stuffed their pockets with gold and silver, dragging bundles of treasure from one tent to the next. But as the night wore on, something began to stir within Jaden. He looked at the others, now feasting and counting their spoils, and felt a pang of guilt. "What are we doing?" he said, his voice cutting through the revelry. The others paused, startled. "What do you mean?" asked Neriah, a chunk of bread still in his hand. Jaden stood looking back toward the distant walls of Samaria. "The city is starving. Our people are dying. And here we are, keeping this to ourselves." Shammah frowned. "They didn't care about us when we were starving. They cast us out, remember?" "I remember," Jaden said quietly. "But that doesn't matter now. If we stay silent, if we keep this to ourselves, we're no better than the famine that's killing them. We have to tell them. It's the right thing to do." The others were silent for a moment, weighing his words. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. As dawn began to break, the four lepers approached the city gates, their voices ringing out against the stillness. "Open the gates! We bring news!" The guards, weary and suspicious, peered down at them. What news could lepers bring that's worth waking the city? "The Arameans are gone," Jaden shouted. "Their camp is abandoned. There's food, supplies, treasure, enough for everyone." The guards hesitated, unsure whether to believe them. But word quickly reached the king, who, though skeptical, sent scouts to investigate. Hours later, the scouts returned with the truth. The lepers' story was no lie. The siege was over. The Arameans had fled in the night, terrified by what they believed was the sound of a massive army. God had delivered Samaria, and he had used the most unlikely messengers to do it. The gates of the city burst open as the people rushed out, their cries of hunger replaced by shouts of joy. The lepers watched from the side, their hearts full, knowing they had played a part in saving their city. The city of Samaria had been saved, not by warriors or kings, but by four outcasts, men who had every reason to stay silent, every reason to keep the blessing to themselves. But they chose differently. And as they watched the people celebrate, Jaden turned to the others and said, "Sometimes it's the broken who bring the blessing. We were cast out, but God still used us to bring hope to the hopeless. We can never forget that." The lesson of the four lepers is one that echoes through time. No matter how forgotten or broken you may feel, you still have a purpose. Even in your darkest hour, you can choose to do what is right, and in doing so, you may become a vessel of hope, a messenger of salvation for others. Thanks for watching, and for more stories like this, kindly share and subscribe for more, and may you be blessed indeed.